The audience headed into the final episode of The Acolyte with no clear idea of who the main character is, what they want to accomplish, how they relate to the people around them, with a murder mystery having petered out into a psychodrama, a lack of cause and effect or through line, the momentum stalled from repeated use of the Rashomon effect, in which characters give different points of view of the same incident, and with this fanfic-level, identity politics indulgent production, the second worst rating Star Wars show, despite a budget of $180 million. Now that it's all said and done, let's take one last magical misery tour through the top 20 worst moments of Star Wars The Acolyte, to chronicle how this production will endure as one of the worst shows ever made. Things got off to a tone-deaf start at Star Wars Celebration, a promotional event where actress Jodie Turner-Smith teased her character and laid out her views with the identity politics equivalent of fingernails on a blackboard.
Because I feel like Star Wars is very patriarchal, so she's a powerful leader. Yes.
After rubbing much of the fanbase up the wrong way, the actor playing Yord face-planted onto the jagged asphalt of the internet by saying that Anakin Skywalker blew up the Death Star, in a moment of fugue state-inducing cringe.
But if you can't look and see that Anakin blowing up the Death Star possibly killed millions and millions of people.
Thence came the reviews, 100 or more official takes, many just lukewarm enough for the tomato meter to teeter then splat with an algorithmic benefit of the doubt into positive territory. But then the audience had its turn, and never has a symbolic tomato withered, putrefied, liquefied, and burst into a slimy, squelchy rottenness more emphatically. The Acolyte proved that it is possible for a glaring anomaly of stupidity to pass through multiple hands and under numerous sets of eyes and somehow endure, in this case, a fire in space, wafting as if it were a campfire in a mild breeze one might toast marshmallows over in Yosemite National Park, rather than in the vacuum of space. Perhaps the fire was started and sustained by the bluster of queef smog settling in a pall over this show. Like some pint-sized pyromaniac too fixated on fire to be able to focus during physics class, Leslie Headland also depicted a building made of cold stone erupting into flame, evoking such well-documented disasters as the time a guy put a cigarette out at the base of one of the Egyptian pyramids and started a raging inferno, or when a homeless English tramp started a fire made of leaves and trash packets to stay warm and accidentally set Stonehenge ablaze. Another masterful stroke of the show was to take one of the few rare white males and place him in a self-induced spiritual coma for 10 years, levitating a few feet off the ground, where presumably a decade's worth of feces have been cleaned up and his sphincter habitually wiped by obliging Jedi Temple janitors. Not only that, apparently only a minuscule fraction of the $180 million budget of this production was expended on his hair and makeup, so that he looks like he is wearing a stick-on Abraham Lincoln-style beard in a high school production, and his actual plastered-down hair is bulbously apparent under a skull cap, with an uncanny and unsettling impression of a character who was simultaneously 25 and 45. It may be that our levitating friend was having his rations cut into by this body-positive Jedi-abetes, who makes a mockery of every notion of Jedi physical discipline and the mystique of that order. Try to imagine this guy on the skiff above the Sarlacc in Return of the Jedi, doing flips and leaps. Or like Luke trapped in the carbonite chamber, then leaping up, then falling back in again when the wires he clutches snap. Or being too chubby to fit down into the cave on Dagobah. The show's coven of lesbian space witches spawned review channels and children at an approximate ratio of 1,000 to 2, so it has gone forth and multiplied, but certainly not in the way intended. I never imagined I would see lesbian space witches doing a choreographed lesbotic orgasmic number, with the background strains of an orchestra and choir blaring the power of one, the power of two, the power of many, with the word many striking a dissonant atonal note beyond the conception of even the avant-garde compositional minds of John Cage or Stockhausen. The show, despite being the biggest concentration of lesbian creative expression since the Lilith Fair Music Festival of the 1990s, nonetheless sought to show off a bit of male beefcake, though Yord's physique, rather than a buffed paragon of masculinity, seemed disproportionately made up of sinew and tendon, and Yord himself came across like the world's oldest young person. Between Yord and other characters, there was about as much smoldering sexual tension as that between two window mannequins whose genital mounds are placed in vague relation to each other in a shop window. Amandla Stenberg, seeing the criticism online, decided someone needed to be the adult in the room and take charge of the narrative, slapping back against the haters with a mumble rap track where superfluous elements such as melody, semi-decent rhyming, choruses, instrumentation, or basic quality were set aside, because who needs hang-ups about musical quality when there's so much sly, empowering attitude? Tedious, lightweight folks for whom empowerment equates to quality in and of itself were stirred by it, while people who just want to see cool, original, and uplifting Star Wars felt the last diaphanous wisp of their childhood vanish into the ether of a culturally polluted modernity. Bravely dispensing with hackneyed, yawn-inducing old ideas like setup and payoff, Leslie Headland built up the idea of a Wookiee Jedi, brought into conflict with a mysterious Dark Force user hell-bent on settling a vendetta. Want to see a Wookiee fight one-on-one in full flight, in full control of his faculties and Force powers? Or how a Wookiee, known as a species for their severe temperament, would exercise control and focus in the midst of a duel? Well, shit out of luck, because the whole confrontation happens off-screen and we just get to look at a Wookiee corpse in a state of rigor mortis. Leslie Headland also got tongues wagging, and not just between the sheets at home, by retroactively making Star Wars prequel figure Ki-Adi-Mundi into someone alive before he was born. Wikipedia brought in a freelance consultant from Ingsoc in Orwell's 1984 to retroactively decide the history of Ki-Adi-Mundi, because why not? At some point, Leslie Headland roused herself briefly from her identity politics reverie, and for half an hour or so, before returning to that indulgent idyll, wrote some slapdash, half-assed comedic skit involving a badger creature called Basil. Sussing out that the woman on a ship is an interloper, and instead of going for help or doing anything sensible, he opts to lurch and shuffle around like Hoggle from Labyrinth, kicking and slapping at May's shins in a painful attempt at slapstick comedy, which just makes you feel sorry for the actor, and the actress, and the production crew, and the show, and the franchise, and civilization. Being herself lesbian and casting her lesbian spouse, and then a gay actor to play Jord, and a non-binary actress to play May and Osha, Leslie Headland then thought to keep the theme going by casting a gay actor and comedian as a Jedi, who prepared for the role by spending a week receiving a continuous intravenous drip of soy, and then going full tilt, and doing the equivalent of Keith Richards of the Rolling Stones booking himself into a Swiss clinic to have a full blood transfusion to cleanse himself of drugs, except in this instance, a full blood to soy transfusion, so that if he were to bleed, it would be pure white and look like Bishop being torn apart at the end of Aliens. Towards the end of the series, Jodie Turner-Smith turns into a cloud-like apparition, which Sol then shivs with his lightsaber, with Turner-Smith then telling him with surprising calmness, despite just having had her non-corporeal mass of swirling particles stabbed through, that she was actually intending to let Osha go with the Jedi. All of this is a confusing on-screen mess where a lack of context or precedent or established circumstances mean the viewer feels little emotionally because they can't get to grips with what is happening, and therefore the climactic moment is so much of a nothing burger it might as well just be 2 stale sesame seed buns. But just as we're struggling to process this development, the rest of the Witch Coven collectively mind-meld, and by clutching hands and swaying in a trance, possess the mind of Kalnaka the Wookiee, and poor Kalnaka goes ballistic with lesbian witch possession. It is more like a Yeti on meth going psycho. But just when you're contending with this, we have visited upon us the spectacle of the sapphic space witches slumping over and dying from being overwhelmed by force feedback. Something so preposterous and abrupt, it makes you snicker and shake your head in a mixture of incredulity, exasperation, and genuine lols. Of course, when Osha and May confront Sol after he does a little lightsaber fight with the stranger, they don't bother to get his side of the story, and he doesn't bother to tell it beyond, "I did the right thing. I was trying to protect you." I guess there was no room in the script for Osha to ask why, and for Sol to say, well, she turned into a freaky smoke monster and started to evaporate your sister, so I did what anyone would do and acted in self-defense. Moments earlier, the Sith and May exchange banter copy and pasted right out of Return of the Jedi. "Feel your anger," Khmer says. "This is the source of your pain. Strike him down and your journey will be complete." With the Acolyte coming to an end, it is possible that, in spite of all the derision and disconnect, critically and commercially, Kathleen Kennedy will green-light a second season out of stubborn solidarity and
sheer fucking hubris.
But as we close this out, it would be remiss of me to not give a shout-out to the people I'm most grateful to. My fellow YouTubers who watched, edited, and pontificated upon this slop. To you, fellow traveller of a viewer. And perhaps, most of all, Sotnakam, Jar Jar Jar, and TX goodies.